I'm still a traveler. I'm still on my journey with all of this, but I need to take this other road that's different than the one I've been on in order to feel satisfied.
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Ihsan.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And this is episode 147 of the podcast. And it's March 6th, 2024, as we record this. Today, we're talking about reset buttons and pivoting for authors because we have a lot to say about that today. Thank you to our existing patrons for believing in our work offline and here in the podcast. You can become a patron of the arts at patreon.com/Valerie Ihsan for books, writing instruction, coaching, and planning, and patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre. Announcements. I have a reading on Sunday. Yay!
Cool.
The anthology that was published by Tsunami Press is having a couple readings this weekend, and I am reading on Sunday, my essay, Eye Contact. So that's happening for me. So if you're local, Sunday, 3:00, Tsunami Books in Eugene.
What else are you doing? What else are you doing?
What else am I
You can go
doing?
down to nobody, like anybody else. What are
Oh,
you
I thought you
doing? Go
asked
down to
me. Like, what
Tsunami
else am I
Books.
doing?
No, 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 no. I'm like, what else are you doing? If you're in Eugene, go down to Tsunami Books or up
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Tsunami Books, depending on where you
Depending on
live.
where you are, yeah.
Yeah.
And the registration is still open for the 2024 Writer Craft Writing Retreat and Workshop in Marcola for the summer. It's August 22nd to the 25th. It's pretty rad. I designed this. I'm so happy with this retreat. It
I love
just
that.
thrills me every time because I'm sure I've told this to you, but I when I was a young mother and
Hmm.
had, babies around, writing was pretty much impossible because I was constantly dealing with toddlers and puppies and, occupational therapy appointments, and all the kids had lots of things, and I was homeschooling at one point, and I was going to school also, and so it was just insane. And so
You're
finding
stressing
any
me out.
time to
That is stressing me out just hearing it. So
So I craved like uninterrupted writing time, but I also felt kind of guilty, as parents do. I don't know if that's like a
get
default
over
button or
that.
something.
It is.
And I
It
didn't
totally is.
want
Yeah.
to, like, I couldn't justify the expense at the time because I felt like, okay, well, then I'll just go to a conference because then I'm learning something and I'm networking with other authors, and, this will be good for my
Right.
career. And so I would go to conferences, which were awesome. And I got super inspired, but I still didn't have any time to write. So I wanted a hybrid event. And so that's why I created this writing retreat, because it is a combo of both. There's 4 workshops in the retreat, and an open mic, and a scene analysis circle, which is optional. And then all of the writing time too. Plus all of the food is provided, and it's just amazing gourmet food. It's a beautiful setting right on the Mackenzie River. It's just gorgeous. I love it. I can't wait.
I love the Mackenzie River is picturesque.
It
It's
is. It really is.
right there. I love it.
So yeah, we have 4 private tickets left, and there's 3 shared tickets. And the shared tickets there's a big it's kind of like, it's a wooden gazebo. It's a yurt, basically, a wooden yurt. It's gorgeous, and they just built it, and so there's a lot of beds in it. So I'm just going to put like 3 people in that. So if you want a reduced price on the ticket, you can opt for sharing space with someone else.
Cool.
And it's a small, there's only 14 people, I think, max. So you can still hang out with other authors and talk shop if you want to, but it's small and quaint, and, you know, it's really great. I think you should go to valerieihsan.com/retreat and look at all the pictures and the testimonials, and it's really good. And it's really inexpensive too. So head on over there, check it out.
Get over there. Get over there.
Any updates or announcements for you?
Well, we're going to talk about it later, but
Oh, yeah,
definitely
yeah. Okay.
a lot of pivoting in my world.
Mm,
Um, I've kind of I've sort of embraced the art of changing directions, I guess, and like or you know, yes, I've embraced the art of changing directions. Let's just say
that's
that.
great.
Yeah,
I like that.
I hope. I hope
Um,
it's great.
I reading wise, since we talked last, oh yeah, I'm just going to do a really quick, like two sentence update on my world for listeners. Last time we had an update, my mother-in-law, I was in Turkey still. My mother-in-law was in the ICU. Since then, she did die. We decided to
Mm,
stay in Turkey longer, for the funeral and, all of the paperwork and stuff that has to happen after that. And we came home and my dog died. And so it's just been like a little bit of when the pandemic happened, I heard a lot of people in the writing industry, in the writing world, be talking about not being able to read anymore. And I thought that was really interesting. And I did not have that experience myself. I was working in the bookstore at the time, and a lot of people were coming in and buying books, and there was time to read, and it was a way to escape. And so I didn't have that, like, I can't read thing. But
right.
I feel that now. I totally understand that. Every time I pick up a book, I can read a couple pages and then my mind just starts wandering and I can't focus. I've tried reading nonfiction, I've tried reading fiction, I've tried reading. So since since my mother-in-law died, it's just been I haven't been able to do much reading. So I can pick up, like, I have an arc. It's called Thunder Song. So it's not out yet, but it's by the same woman, Sasha Lapointe. She's a native writer in Washington, I think. And she wrote Red Paint, which was my favorite memoir
I've
last year,
seen
I
that
think.
cover. I've seen
Yeah.
that cover.
So she just came out with this, I mean, it's not published yet, but it's a book of essays. So right up my alley again,
Cool.
and it's short, so I've been able to, like, read an essay out of that. Or I was also reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. That's kind of short, like, what's that David Lynch one called? Catching the Fish?
Catching the Big Fish.
Catching the Big Fish. You know how it's like, they're like little
Yeah.
snippets, you can't really actually read it all the way through. It's weird if you do.
Yeah, it's an odd book
More
to try
like
to
an
sit down and
Yeah, it's more like a daily inspirational read or something like that, like a
it's like
day
a
book.
coffee table book. You're sitting down, you've got 10 minutes to kill. Like, oh, I need a little bit of juice. Here it is.
Yeah. So that's what I'm reading, really, is like Thunder Song and the Book of Awakening. That's my daily day book that I've been doing, and The Creative Act. So those are the books that I'm kind of like playing with right now. I mean, there's others that I'm reading too that I'm in the middle of, but I just haven't been able to
Yeah.
concentrate on them.
It'll
So
come
once
back.
again, I'm
Yeah.
reading a whole bunch of books at the same time, but that's just because I can't seem to focus on any of them.
Right.
What are you reading?
Well, we haven't talked in a while. I've read a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, I guess the highlight between here and there was a Psalm for the Well-Built,
Don't
the
you
Becky
love
Chambers.
that?
I didn't love it as much as the second one.
I did
I
love
didn't
the prayer for the crown shy. That was that's because you
was
read that first. You read them out of order.
I read two and then one.
Yeah, the
Um,
prayer for the crown shy I thought was way better.
I thought that was fantastic. Like
Hmm.
glad I read it. And I'm by no means like I thought that the second book was a 5 and this one was a 4.5.
Do
Um, which I mean, if every book I picked up was a 4.5, I'd be the happiest reader on earth.
you know when I
And that's a
first
pretty high.
read Psalm for the Well Built, I my response to that was it was lovely, it was delightful, and I was like, I kind of was wondering, like, when it was going to get started, because I
Yeah,
felt like
that's
it
I
was
felt
just
my
sort of a following this lovely journey, but like, okay. And then at the end of the book, like in the last chapter, I was like, oh, now I
yeah,
know what all of this means. And I almost wanted to go
right.
back and reread the whole thing. Like the whole book made sense then because of that last chapter. And
My
so
sort
that's
of
what I liked about that book.
my sort of informal criticism of that book is that like that's a trope in sci-fi it's a trope in fiction in general. It's like the wise outsider sort of asks the questions of the insider to explain the
Mm-hmm.
world, and sort of the outsider teaching the insider. I don't, okay, so for me, I don't love that trope as the main trope in the book. I like that secondary character. Succession has a really great character. That series, Succession from HBO, has a great
Oh.
sort of outsider point of view on the world, and but it's used in balance. I'm always very suspicious of books where that's the main story. Like, let's go on a journey in my world, and you, outsider, are going to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she does it exceptionally well.
Mm-hmm.
I think makes that um, she makes it palatable, and I think it's super wise that it's a novella, not a novel, because I think she's sort of crafted a book that like she's using a very noticeable trope in a big way, but she's not overstaying her welcome. So you kind of
Mm.
get this like,
And by
I think
she,
if it were
listener, it's Becky Chambers that we're talking about.
Becky, oh, I didn't say that. Okay, Becky Chambers, right? I I I think she does a really good job. That's been kind of my reading mission this year, is to read novellas, because as we're going to
Mm.
talk about, like, I'm interested in cutting that story. Like, how do you tell a story in 30 to 40,000 words versus 60 to 80?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I feel like that's just a reader niche that I want to hit. But currently, I'm reading a book called Lost Places by Sarah Pinsker. It's kind of weird sci-fi. She's an award winner. She's won all the big like Nebulas and Hugos and things. There's a story in that book called Where Oaken Hearts Do Wander. It is maybe the most unique story I've ever read in my life. I've never read anything quite like it. Um, her stories are weird. They're unforgettable. I mean, I've read half the book, and every one of the stories, even the ones I don't gravitate to and I don't like, um, I say you kind of admire the story uh because she's trying to do something completely different. Like, Where Oaken Hearts Do Gather is the strangest, oddest, most satisfying story I've ever read. Like, maybe top 10 favorite short stories ever.
Hmm.
Um, and I found her on a podcast. It was on a podcast. I listened to this podcast where they do short stories, and these guys were gushing over it. And I thought, all right, here I am. I'm gonna buy the book, and this story can't be that good. And it was actually better than they made it sound. Um, so yeah, yeah, there's a story in this book about like there's a story about like it's a weird array of settings too. There's like, it's like one story's about a British folktale, the other one's about a lost sort of television show, public broadcast access television show. There's a story about a favorite diving spot in a river.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a story that's like sword and sandal kind of fantasy, but it's all this, it's just improbably weird. And the last one I read, called Two Truths and a Lie, I was 90% through the story sure of where it was going, and then it went another place. And
Mm.
like I actually just took the dog for a walk. So I'm like, I got to think about this, because I don't know how it worked, but it did. So I'm gushing about it. And she's getting a lot of like grassroots support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm gonna buy everything she's written, because I think she's
Mm.
just got a very sneaky, weird way of
Uh-huh. Does
affecting
she
me.
only
So
write short stories?
she has other stuff.
Okay.
She has novels. She is a master, though, of the short story. She has a novel, I think it's called A Song for a New Day, that won a Nebula for best novel. Um, but man, she just has this way to twist the short story. It's just Chekhov. It's like Chekhov wrote short stories that like, it's that whole R.L. Stine thing too, where he says like there's the beginning, the middle, and the twist, and she executes a twist in a short story like no other. So
Yeah, there's
now
another
that you're
book
too,
by Sarah Pinsker that I haven't read, but it was one of those that I was checking out, like, should we get this for the bookstore? It's called We Are Satellites. And
yep,
it's
yep, I've seen that
pretty
one.
cool. Like read the back of the book. It's the description is pretty rad. It's yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's relevant, for our time.
yeah. And she did not pay for this placement in this. She's not. This is not a
This
paid
podcast is
endorsement.
sponsored by Sarah Pitzker.
I get nothing, but God, that book will reside in within reach. Because I think the last story I read, it's like I got to reread it because I don't know where the twist happened earlier. That's to me the essence of like a good weird story. That's the David Lynch
Mm,
thing. Like the twist came before you noticed it, and then you have to do that sort of rewind where you say, "Oh, this is actually where the story changed," but I didn't know that. I
hmm.
didn't know that until here.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So,
Yeah. So I think the last time I talked, I had just finished reading, or maybe I was still reading The Seven and a Half Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle
uh-huh.
by Scott Turto, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Yeah, fabulous. That's the last book I've read that was just like, what? This is amazing. So
Yeah.
that was good too. That was another one of those like you just don't know like who did it until the very last
Right.
chapter. And it's like, what?
Right.
I mean, you will
Right.
I like that kind of like surprise. I mean, I I've never been super great at like figuring out the whodunits,
I'm terrible,
beforehand.
terrible at it. My
And so
wife will
I
figure it
like
out in Act
that.
One.
I mean, I like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to know and then be like not surprised at the end. Like that ruins it for me. So I like not knowing, but other people pick it up. Like if my husband and I read the same book, like he'll know before I will.
Yeah.
And so I wonder sometimes if I'm deliberately obtuse because I'm not like I don't want to figure it out myself. I want to be surprised at the end. But this, I think there's no way you could have figured this out. Like it's one of those like if
It's
you
like a meal. Some people want to know what's in the dish and because they want to analyze it, and other people just enjoy the flavor. And it's like I
there you
think
go.
both people end up happy at the end. It's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. 5 stars either way.
All right, let's switch into our
Let's pivot.
reset and pivoting.
Pivot.
So why don't you start first because you said it was like kind of part of your author update anyways.
I want to read from memory the first stanza from Robert Frost, the Road Not Taken, because I think I always think about this when I think about this a lot. When two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. I,
Mm,
I, I, that poem is like, it's so meaningful because of the end where he talks about taking, the two roads diverged and he couldn't take both, so he took the one less traveled, and that made the difference. And I think that's what gets quoted. But
yeah.
I think what's always interesting about the poem is that the sort of melancholy at the beginning, because he recognizes that he's a traveler and he cannot go both
Mm,
on both roads. And I think there's a lot to be said in whatever your venture is business wise. Like if it's you can't always do both paths, and life shortens as we get older, and the
hmm.
time to do everything um passes us. And I think choosing which road to take is becomes more important. But I've and anybody who listens knows I've been kind of the path I'm on and the path I've been on. um but I think in the last like 3 or 4 months, um I've just sort of taken this, like, I guess, signals from the world that says like there's a different way to do this. There's another, like, there's an evolved place that there's a more evolved way you can do this. And so really for the last, I think I would say 3 months solid, it's been I've been undertaking this process of like, how do I acknowledge what works in the business that I run, the creative practice that I have, and acknowledge what works and retain those things while also pivoting to new ways of doing things for the things that I acknowledge that don't work. Um, I, for example, like writing the series that I write. I enjoy it, but it's not the only series, the only thing that I want to write. I have two, you know, I have multiple directions that I want to go. Um, and so the question, you know, for me a while back was, how do I pivot from I'm exclusively writing this thing to I am now writing both? And there's a guilt that comes from, you know, now I'm taking away from, like, taking a little energy away from strange air stories, and I'm developing something else. And so there's this whole path that I've seen that's like, it's, you know, first the identification of, you know, there's another route, and knowing that there's another route there. Um, and that's, you know, that's where the journey begins. Like I feel like maybe 3 months ago I was at that road in the yellow wood and
Mm-hmm.
seeing, like, you know, I'm still a traveler, I'm still on my journey with this, with all of this, but I need to take this other road that's different than the one I've been on, to in order to feel satisfied. And that took a little time to say, okay, Eric, you're not cheating on that other story if you write
Mm.
another one. You're not doing a disservice to something. It's actually not. I think the tendency for me would be like this sense that, like, well, I'm by admitting I wanted to do something else concurrently, I'm acknowledging a flaw in that thing, and that wasn't it either. Um, so I've just been pivoting from like limiting beliefs in a lot of
Mm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of like acknowledging the limiting beliefs, acknowledging the sort of some of it just like not even sensical thinking, and then figuring out like, well, how do I take that next growth step so that both of these things can coexist? Um, I've done it in business too. There's like I really just came to a place, I probably in mid-December, where I said, you know, I have this sort of business engine that works, and it works a certain way, and I've been content with it for a while because it does its thing. But I've also learned to say, but there are other things that it can do. I can expand my reach. I can find new audiences. I can drum up new business. And, you know, I've had these limiting beliefs and thoughts that say, well, I don't do this and I don't do that and I don't do this. Well, some of those things that I say I don't do are why I have not taken that step. You know, why I still stand at that fork in the road and say,
Mm.
like, what if? So
Would you
really
say
this
that
last come
asking what if is a way to start to challenge a limiting belief that we have?
I think for some people, like, very likely, yes. For me, I live in what if. And I
Mhm.
stand at that fork in the road and I'm like, well, what if it's this? And what if it's that? And what if it's this? And I what if there's an inn down that road a comfortable distance? What if I have to camp on that road? Like you know, I'll stand there and ask those questions again and again and again. And it becomes that paralysis by analysis. So for me, that's like, it's getting past what if and just saying, you know what, Eric, you're going to start writing a new series of books. And by you have all of the material to start writing these things and being prolific, I can trust that I will write both of those things this year and satisfy both of those needs. It's not
Mm.
taking away,
Mhm.
right? Like, so I have to, for me, it's getting past the what if. I think for a lot of people, maybe that first question is what if? Like, what if I imagined another series? Um, for my business, like, there's certain places I've never marketed. I've always comfortably done what I've done and said, this drums up the business that I need, and that's fine. Um, but I've also found myself hitting up against that glass ceiling of like, what if I did something different? What if I, instead of working with these tools, started working with these other ones? Maybe that's where these other pieces, you know, where that other gear in my business comes from. Um, and so now I'm like looking at, you know, I do what I do to drum up business and it's effective, but like, I'm bringing something concurrently on. I'm bringing on digital marketers. I'm actually actively interviewing digital marketers in my local community to start like what happens when this goes into different channels? What happens when we go to LinkedIn? What happens when we market to Facebook? What happens when we actually look for people outside of search engines? What happens then? And it's a little scary and it's hard, but our interviews often leave me feeling a little bit like, oh my gosh, I've been cheating myself because I haven't been doing this, or I feel silly because I'm acknowledging there's this great big hole in my marketing plan. But it's really not like that, you know. I think I acknowledge that the world is vast, and sometimes we don't explore things because we're already doing so much, you know. So
There has to be a little
getting
bit of
past,
compassion for yourself and forgiveness too. Like and you can write affirmations for yourself. Like if you get stuck in that
yeah,
research step and feeling bad about, oh, I've got this hole in my whatever, then you can forgive yourself for not knowing how to do it in the past. Like now I know how to do it. Now I'm making this new decision. Now my, business is going to be different, or now my series is going to be different, or whatever. Like you can always
right.
forgive yourself for not knowing before. And I think that's, that kind of sounds silly to say it out loud, but actually it's really necessary for that limiting belief to let go and
Yeah,
to give yourself some grace for not knowing all the answers, and being able to say that to yourself, I think actually helps the movement and that limiting belief to not evaporate, but work process through it better,
just
faster.
move past it.
Hmm.
Just yeah. I think you hear a common refrain with parents where it's like, you can't do all the things. You just can't. It's not possible. You can't be on the PTA. You can't be the Cub Scout leader. You can't be the coach on the baseball team. All that stuff is like, you are a person. So I think but I don't think you can fault yourself for you took a path, right? You only get to that fork in the road because you took a path.
Hmm.
I built a business using, I created relationships with partner agencies. I got good with Google ads. I got really good at blogging, and that worked. That has worked. But when I look at that whole piece of the pie, it's like I've only cut out a piece of, I've only eaten off going back to the dinner. I've only eaten part of the plate. There's a
Hmm.
whole other part of this plate that I could, and I guess yeah, I've had to get over. I've had this real anxiety about, like, when I call this digital marketing company or firm, right? There's this like officialness that comes with it. And I tell them, hey, I've never explored social media as a business tool. What can you, there's this little bit of anxiety that I've had, and I continue to have a tiny bit of it, where I like of judgment. Like, are they going to
Hmm.
judge me? Be
Hmm.
like, I'm telling them I'm a serious business, but I've not done the thing that they're experts in.
Hmm.
That's a big leap to get over,
Hmm.
it's a big thing to say, I've never tried this, expert in this thing. Um, please help me.
Hmm.
But and that's where I've gravitated toward, so I've been choosing a digital marketing partner, and I've made the commitment to like 6 to 9 months of whoever I hire. It's going to be 6 to 9 months. I'm not going to be short-term Charlie over here.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like the people that I've gravitated to are the people who have looked at that like, oh, okay, you've never tried this. Okay, so let's talk about, like, the guy that I'm really angling towards was, he looked at, I could tell from our interview that he was looking at it like an opportunity. Like, oh, I have this business that's fully fleshed out in one way, but it's not in another. And
Hmm.
how are we going to do this? Immediately made himself a partner,
Hmm.
versus I don't know. There's some people who just want to slot you into a slot, and that's that.
Hmm.
So pivoting is hard. It's hard. But I think, like, just like
Hard,
Frost
why?
talks about,
Hard, scary?
I think it can be. Yeah, it's a little scary for me to think about, like, there's that frightening feeling of like I'm diverting my energy from,
Hmm.
and what happens to that thing if I divert my energy from,
Hmm.
I'm not, I have to affirm for myself that I'm not going to stop writing in my original series. I'm not going to stop doing the things that have worked for me before as a marketer. I'm now adding. I think it's hard for some people, myself being one of them. It's like, to think in terms of abundance versus scarcity. Like
Yeah.
you can, if you partner yourself up right and you take your energy, if you take your energy seriously, and you can do more without without actually starving the other thing. And I think that's scary to, I think, to just acknowledge that you're abundant versus scarce. And it's hard thinking to get over. If you think about people who like grew up poor, even
Hmm.
after they become, maybe attain some comfort and wealth, you still have those old sort of ingrained
Yeah.
values of scarcity, or you
That's
have
the
these.
limiting belief.
Yeah, yeah,
This
like
won't
it's, I'm
last,
never gonna have.
or yeah. Hmm.
And it's also limiting the other way. If you are accustomed to abundance and your life becomes scarce for a while, like it's limiting to think that that abundance is there. The new belief is like, okay, I'm dealing with scarcity. How do I deal with this? It's, I think that like, yeah, I think that I've considered the pivots before and I wasn't ready for it. And I think now I've just been ready for it. And now
Being
here we
ready is
are.
important. Yeah. That's good to know too. And because I was thinking as you were talking, like, I feel like I'm stuck in that what if part. Because I'm also asking, like, maybe my business could look this way, or maybe it could look this way, or maybe it could go this way. And so I'm kind of stuck in that place where, yeah, I feel like I'm sort of looping in that place of asking what if, researching the next step, and not being able to forgive myself for not knowing. And what if, and not being able to, like I'm just in that loop
Right.
of asking my, so I'm happy to know that I can get past that, and that being, yeah, what you just said, it just was
Yeah.
helpful to
Yeah.
hear.
It's hard to see. It's hard to know. It's hard to like, and I mean, I felt like a goldfish for a really long time where I was just like kind of
Spinning,
going
spinning,
around and
spinning.
around in the bowl. And I was not really, I don't know. I just felt like I was not really like, I could see the other things. I think that's the tragedy of the goldfish in the bowl, is where the
Mm,
goldfish can see there's stuff out there. And there,
hmm.
I also, it, and I think there's always going to be things out there. That's another part of it that I felt like I had to get past, is this like,
FOMO.
whatever path I choose, I'm going to hire this digital marketer in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to take a path, and we're going to be down that road 3, 6, 9 months, and we're going to be in it. There's still going to be other things out there, even though I'm taking on this new thing. Like I feel like there's still going to be something else to not be doing. You're never going to do all of it, and that's another part of like having taken a few of these steps, is like it's just acknowledging that like the feeling of FOMO is real, and it's never going to go away. And but you are perfectly, you can take that next bite. You just can. You can. You're permitted to do it.
Hmm. Yeah. We have
I
permission
don't.
to explore.
Yeah, and I've said this to the few of the marketers that I've interviewed. I've said like, I'm committed to doing this for a period of time. I'm not going to. I said to one person, I'm not going to come knocking on your door in 6 weeks if my business hasn't been reinvented. It's
Hmm.
not, and that's not going to be the person I am. Um, and they also came back and said, but we'll acknowledge that there's a point where approaches we're taking won't work,
Hmm.
and we will have to pivot from that. And that's like, actually, that hearing that from multiple people has been gratifying, in that they've all said, hey, we're going to take on something new. We will evaluate what works and what doesn't, and we'll keep evolving what we're doing. So
Yeah, I think.
knowing, and that's going to happen in the creative side too. I'm going to
Hmm.
start down this. I've got this series going. I've got the first book written, and the second one started yesterday. And it's like,
Wow.
who knows what's going to happen with it?
Hmm.
I mean, it might not be the antidote to my feeling of like needing more, but it's certainly been fun to explore. And at the same time, I'm finishing up another Strange Air book, or I'm kind of working through rewrites on that. Um, and they can coexist. The characters are so different that I
Mm.
don't even. Like I know what pool I'm stepping in. The worlds are different. I know what I'm doing.
That's exciting. All right. Well, I think
Yeah.
the key in this has been I really like the process that you went through. You identify, like, how do I pivot from this? Recognizing there's a different way, taking time to process that. How do I take the next growth step? Asking what if, getting past that what if to the next step. Yes, I can do that. Researching whatever that next step is, forgiving yourself for not knowing, and then, having permission to explore and then reflecting and reflecting
Yeah.
on what is working, what's not working. And so thank you for reminding
I
us of all those steps.
Yeah, I think it's also just remembering that like by adding, you're not removing. Like it's not like there's that great sign from from social justice protests where it says it's justice, it's not pie. There's like no finite amount of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's as much justice as you create.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're like by adding something, sure, you're diverting energy and attention, but it doesn't mean it's not all or nothing. You can, again, I'm going to keep blogging. I'm going to keep doing the things I do while something else is working concurrently. And hopefully these two things are now doing the
Mm-hmm.
work. So it's hard to see that. It's hard to see that.
Yeah.
Mm,
Awesome. Thanks for talking with me about pivoting and reset buttons.
absolutely.
I feel
My
like this
pleasure.
has been really useful for me right now in this place that I'm in.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
All right. Well, I'll see you next week then.
Until next time,
Until next time, happy writing, everybody. Bye for now.
take care.